The member for Melton.
Thank you, Acting Speaker, and I rise to contribute to the Drugs, Poisons and Controlled Substances Amendment Medically Supervised Injecting Centre Bill 2023. And the first thing I want to do is acknowledge the Minister and for putting this bill forward, and her staff for the contribution of her staff, and I thank them for that. Obviously, the objectives of the bill are to establish the North Richmond Medically Supervised Injecting Room as a permanent service in its current location, and also to remove limitations to the MSIR models of care, improve service delivery efficiency, responsiveness, governance and continuity. My contribution will be about going back in history. When I was the Secretary of the Ambulance Union back in 2017, when this model was proposed, I represented 3,500 to 4,000 members, ambulance members, who on a day-by-day basis responded to drug overdoses, in particular in the North Richmond area. And we were totally supportive of the trial of this supervised injecting room, and I know the members that I had at the time were totally supportive of it. And the lead up to that was there were 54 deaths in the streets that school children walk past, all right? And to suggest that it's in a bad location because it's near a school is complete nonsense, because they were walking over dead bodies. They were walking over unconscious people with needles in their arm. They were in the gutters, they were in cars, they were in laneways, they were in houses, they were on the footpath. And to suggest that this is worse now because it's beside a school, this is worse now because it's beside a school, is complete nonsense. Nonsense, all right?
Member for Lowen.
Thank you, Speaker. The member for Melton is misleading the House. He's referring to the Ryan report. I'm happy to make this report available to the House, which clearly states that the issues around amenity in the local area have escalated since the injecting room has opened.
Member for Melton, do you want to speak on the point of order?
No, I just want to continue.
No. That's not a point of order, it's a point in the debate. The member can continue.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. Anyway, we'll move on. So the history shows that paramedics were totally supportive of it because of 54 dead bodies in the street, right? And unless people were walking around with their eyes shut, they were there. You had to step over them, right? That's not happening today because that injecting room is beside a school. It's not happening. That doesn't mean to say you get rid of all overdoses in the street. You'll never do that, no matter how many rooms you have, no matter how many you have, right? But to suggest that it's worse now for students, it is not accurate. Not accurate. Anyway, let's move.
Member for Lowen.
Thank you, Speaker. The member for Melton is reflecting upon the Ryan report, which has been used as a basis to form this legislation. He's reflecting and saying that it's not true. I therefore again ask that I make the report available to the House so that the full information is available to the member of Melton, and that he understands that actually there has been a massive impact on their local area.
As I ruled earlier,
it's
a point of debate, not a point of order.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Speaker. So anyway, we'll move on from where I started. I'll come back to the issue about the school later. As people probably know, I was a paramedic for 15 years and I did attend to overdoses, drug overdoses, and the member for Footscray is here, and I'll say that in my history in the western suburbs, where I practiced most of my career, even though there are drug overdoses in every suburb, not just North Richmond, but we had a injecting room in Footscray, but it wasn't supervised. It was called the 10-pin bowling alley at Footscray. And I remember a specific case that I attended to, which was a young woman, a 30-year-old woman, who injected herself in the toilets in the 10-pin bowling alley at Footscray, but unfortunately she never came out of that cubicle alive. And if we'd had a supervised injecting room available to her, right, she probably still would have been here today. And I can still see that woman in the back of my mind. It stays with you for the rest of your life as a paramedic. Right? So we attended to many people in that 10-pin bowling alley. It's gone now. So they've obviously moved on from there. I know there are some still around Footscray, but not doing it in the 10-pin bowling alley. But let me tell you that paramedics respond to these incidences every day, and in North Richmond, they had such a high incidence. That's why this room is there. And you can talk to the local paramedics in the Richmond area, and they will say to you, they're not responding to dead bodies on the street like they used to, right? Because of this supervised injecting room. And in fact, I happened to have a conversation with Danny Hill last week, who's the Secretary of the Victorian Ambulance Union. And Danny sent me an email and he said he would prepared to be quoted, so I'll quote him. The Richmond Supervised Injecting Facility has successfully managed over 6,000 overdoses. Without the centre, that would have been 6,000 overdoses that happened on the street, each requiring at least one, most likely 2 ambulance resources to be dispatched, and spending at least an hour trying to revive the patient. Much longer if they have to transport the patient to hospital. Then they have to clean up, then they have to restock their equipment. In resource hours that are saved by the centre, we are almost talking about an additional fully staffed 24-hour ambulance station in Richmond that is available to respond to people in the Richmond community. Even if you ignore the outcomes to patients, ignore the reduction in needle stick injuries and assaults on paramedics in Richmond, and ignore the long-term effects on the health system in caring for people who suffer acquired brain injuries as a result of hypoxia, from an ambulance resourcing perspective, the centre stacks up. Danny Hill represents 6,000 paramedics across the state of Victoria, and he knows that the centre stacks up, and so does his members. I don't know if anyone in this room's been to a drug overdose before, but I'll describe it to you. You get a call out, you go to an overdose, someone's unconscious on the ground, right? We don't know how long they've been down unless someone there will witness it. They may still have the needle in their arm. What happens first is that their breathing reduces or stops, so they go into a respiratory arrest. If they're down long enough, their heart stops. That's when they go into full cardiac arrest. Now, in my early days as a paramedic, we didn't have Narcan to be able to inject that patient. Mica paramedics did, so we had to get Mica paramedics out to administer Narcan. Fortunately, later on into the 90s, general duties paramedics got Narcan and they could provide it intramuscularly. Then there was an intranasal spray created, and now they can administer it through IV. But you administer Narcan to a drug overdose, and that person on the street generally would get up and say, "Pee off, I'm going. I'm not going to hospital, see you later." Or if you did take them to hospital, guess what? They'd say to the staff, "Pee off, I'm out of here." All right, so they generally abscond. This supervised injecting room provides additional health support for these people, and there's been over 3,000 referrals for these people to get other health support. They don't create a relationship when they meet paramedics. They don't create a relationship when they're taken to hospital. They just want to be out of there and go back to what they were doing prior, and that's going to get another hit. That's what happens. But this supervised injecting room provides for additional services for them. And again, it can only happen if we can get those people off the street into this room, not laying unconscious on the footpath, not dying on the footpath, where all of a sudden people didn't see them. I don't know how they didn't see them. 54 of them were dead on the footpath, so someone must have seen them. I should say, while I've got a few seconds to go, I want to commend the staff that work at the centre and applaud their efforts. I also want to commend the paramedics that respond, the nurses, the doctors, the allied health people, everyone that's involved in saving lives. This supervised injecting room saves lives, and it's proven that. And I'm a fan of having more of them. Right? I'm a fan of having more of them, because if it saves lives in North Richmond, it must save lives elsewhere. Right? It must save lives elsewhere. And the primary role of this injecting room is to save lives, and that's what all of us in this parliament should be about, and that is supporting and saving lives, keeping people alive, trying to get them to kick their habit. And look, this is a fantastic bill, and I commend the bill to the House.